The Order 1886 is a lot like your dick. Pretty short. Sorry. Now that I've thoroughly lowered the tone of this video, let's hoist it right back up there. Nice and tight, and wedge it back between the cheeks of discussion.
More than sufficient, I'd say.
Honestly, I know it's a bit of a controversial one, but I actually quite liked this game. Mostly. It's like trying to read a billboard without my glasses on. I have to squint to see all the spelling mistakes. It's riddled with problems, but the overall experience is fun enough that you don't really notice. But, I mean, I have 20 minutes to fill, and this wouldn't be much of a review if I just ended it here, so buckle up and prepare to have all those faults exposed to you now over the course of a hastily edited video on the Order 1886. And if you like what you're hearing, please like the video, subscribe, and comment below your own experience with this weird game. And spoilers ahead for Order 1886. The Order 1886 was developed by Ready at Dawn, the studio who made a bunch of God of War spin-offs and the Okami game for the Wii, which is kind of niche. Released in 2015, it seems to have some pretty solid reviews with a ton of criticism aimed at the story, lack of actual gameplay, and length of the game itself. The graphics were good though. It stars Galahad, some immortal silver fox in service to the Order, who never seems to cheer up about anything and just grumbles his way through every encounter. It got a few super inflated scores that magazines seem obsessed with giving. I mean, come on people, 5 is supposed to be average, not terrible. So it earned some hefty 8+ scores from articles Wikipedia links to but no longer seem to exist, but the quotes from lesser scored articles are pretty lackluster. Disappointingly generic, walking simulator, overstays its welcome at 7 hours, etc. My main takeaway is that the Order 1886 is more interested in being a film than anything else. I mean, just look at that aspect ratio. I know you can say this about a few super linear games, Uncharted, any Telltale game, Yakuza, hentai, but I mean it here. Like, I actually mean it. This game is probably 90% cutscenes. There are 16 chapters and like 5 or 6 of them are just pure cutscenes and nothing else. And the rest of the chapters are pretty heavily bookended by them too, or basically a cutscene masquerading as gameplay because it's got some redundant QuickTime events in it. In some cutscenes, you are told to push forward on L3 to make your character move forwards until the next dialogue line or something. You'll probably get to play a solid 5 minutes of game between each 10-minute cutscene, with some shooting and maybe even some collectibles. And sometimes you can't even tell if the cutscenes have ended. They're all very seamless, but then your character awkwardly stands there for a moment, then gets shot in the head and dies, and it's a bit embarrassing. Like slipping on ice in front of strangers and trying to pretend it's okay and that you totally meant to do that. Whenever the fog of cutscenes finally clears and Galahad gets loose in a small linear shooting section, I have to say it is quite fun. It's a fluid FPS. You get access to a bunch of different guns and grenades with various pros and cons, some available across the game and some just for certain chapters, a system I'd compare to Resistance 2's arsenal, which actually probably isn't a compliment, but I can't quite decide why. There's like 4 different kinds of pistol or revolver or whatever the kids are calling them now, a few grenades, shotguns that vary between a cloud of confetti and blasting a pile of bricks directly into someone's face, some gimmicky fire and lightning weapons, and whatever else they deign to include. I found out through the trophy list that I have something called Black Sight, which might have been mentioned in the tutorial or something, but honestly I don't remember being told about it at all. It basically takes the excellence of John Marston's Deadeye and then makes it really slow and a bit awkward to use, so you never really know where you're aiming, and sometimes you accidentally just exit out of it while you're trying to line up a good shot, so you end up not really using it. Plus, it's not the headshot insta-kills of Deadeye, but rather random shots in random places, so victims don't usually die from it and you're better off just shooting them normally. If you die, you get this little QTE where you can sup some life source and come back, but you have to survive the sup and the wriggle back to life to be able to pull it off. The thing that's never explained is that you get life source but no one else is allowed to use it, so there are some really weird scenes with quite preventable deaths of red shirts and you're just kind of confused as to how you're not allowed to save them too. I'm sure there's an explanation somewhere as to why other people can't drink it, but I saw a few deaths that didn't seem to need to happen and I don't fully understand why, and it kind of took away some of the emotional impact for me. The game has a bunch of difficulty settings but they're pretty unbalanced. Even on easy, several enemy types in the game will kill you in a single hit, like the shotgunners in the penultimate chapter who can one-tap you from across the room. The stealth is utterly appalling too. In the same chapter, there are a few mandatory instant fail segments that made me want to rip out my own hair. The unwieldy camera just floats behind Galahad's big head, which obscures half the screen, and you'll suddenly get seen by a guy 15 feet away because your fucking mutton chops were hiding him from view. There's this dumb depth of field mechanic that looks great, but then you realise you can't see anything, because all the cover you're behind will be in perfect clarity, but anything beyond that will be blurrier than a smeared window. You can get seen from off-screen, and that's how I died most of the time during the stealth segments, since the enemies seem to just materialise out of nowhere and put a stop to my fun and see me from really far away. And then at the end of the chapter I got seen through a wall, which was brilliant. I actually enjoyed crushing the working class with whichever weapons I could get my hands on, but the melee was super finicky. Sometimes I'd run up to an enemy and just press a button prompt to melee them, and sometimes I just couldn't, and I never knew why. Me and Twitch chat kind of theorised that you could only do melee takedowns if enemies were in certain positions, like backed up against walls or standing conveniently close to the IKEA flat pack. But then I Batista bombed some wanker out of nowhere and all bets were off. Besides that, the mechanics of this game are super basic. Considering you're in some weird steampunk alternative history with an overblown genius version of Nikola Tesla himself at your disposal, something I'll get to later, you get access to 0 upgrades or extra tools to use in combat. Sure, Tessie Boy gives you a cool lockpicking device and a nice current thingy, but they're only used in very specific situations. I mean, you have access to an entire workshop full of nerds in Chapter 2, so you'd expect to be able to use it as a hub area between missions to upgrade your weapons and equipment in a Dishonored style format, but to expect that would be to expect quality, and therefore too much. There's an awesome Morse code thing that you only do once, which is ludicrous. You even get a crossbow in one mission. There are no character abilities to earn or stats to upgrade, so combat is pretty two-dimensional. Don't get me wrong, the few things this game innovates on, it actually does really well. The lockpick mechanic, for example, was fucking great. Probably the best I've seen in a game. I'm glad they didn't poach an Elder Scrolls example or just turn it into a button prompt. You rotate the analog stick and the controller vibrates depending on your proximity to the correct position. When it stops vibrating, you snap the R2 button and lock it into place. It was so fun, I loved it. I'd play a whole 10-hour game of it. Sign me up. The overloady box is great too, with 2 little diodes floating up and down. You trap each one between the red lines and hold it with the L3 and R3 buttons to overload a circuit. There's just something about both these mechanics that is so satisfying to use. There's brilliant haptic feedback that really immerses you in the technology of it all. Makes you feel like you're really doing these things. They're both fairly novel too, so it was actually quite exciting. I've noticed that I've compared The Order to a lot of other games, and I think it's because The Order has a lot of infant ideas that, if developed properly, would look a lot like different mechanics and themes from other games. It has a ton of good ideas, but it's so underdeveloped, like really obviously not as good as it potentially could be. So many parts of this game sucked me in because they set such a good precedent, but then the game did nothing with them, so it kind of unraveled at the end and went to shit as they fell apart, revealed to just be 3 kids in a trench coat. The plot of the game was probably the thing that got the most backlash, and rightfully so. It starts really strong. Your character is on death row, being tortured in an old prison for information about a crime they didn't commit before they get the chop for good, and as you gain control, you help them escape. From here, you flash back to the past, meet your friends and associates, each with their own vibrant and interesting personalities. Galahad has really good chemistry with the other characters. He has professional but kind of adorable flirtations with the token woman. He has a scolding fatherly relationship with his fellow man Lafayette, and a respectful mentee relationship with Lancelot, who is obviously going to die. You follow the events leading up to the arrest, learning about the presence of werewolves and elder werewolves, hunting the people of the city like vicious bloodhounds, and people of said city are pretty sick of it. That and many things. They form a rebellion, wanting basic human rights and fair wages and medical care and whatnot, and naturally your character crushes them without question, popping caps like it's GTA 5. My assumptions were pretty high. I was waiting for Galahad to realise he's on the wrong side all along, that the werewolves are perhaps misunderstood, that the rebels maybe do deserve the equal rights of the royalty you serve, that your order can work with the steampunk tech to create a world worth saving. I thought that the werewolves would be a metaphor for the way the working class were fed upon by the upper classes. Nothing more than meat sacks, bloody, disposable, and something you wouldn't want your guests to see. I thought we'd see a deconstruction of the way the poor and their protests can often be demonised, as Galahad was forced to see things through new eyes, a new perspective. There's a moment in the prologue where he sees some goons cruelly shooting a werewolf through the bars of their prison cell, and Galahad clearly has this moment of reflection, but it never goes anywhere. I also kind of assumed he'd become a werewolf too, which, doesn't happen. The first issue you'll encounter is that there aren't really any werewolves in this game at all. Before chapter 12 or so, I think I saw about 3, and one of them was pretty cutscene heavy. Their AI is absolutely shot too, like those old Spyro characters that just run in circles with their arms flapping around. They charge at you, you press X to dodge, if you fail they bite you, and if you succeed they run away. They'll do a quick circle of the room and come back with the most stiff repetitive animation I've ever seen. There are even vampires. Did you know that? Did you know there are vampires in this game? Even if you've played the game, I'd understand if you had forgotten. The vampires in this game are in this for one scene. You see a single vampire asleep in a coffin, then you close the coffin and set it on fire, and that's it. You could have replaced them with a barrel of toxic waste and it'd have the same effect on the story. There's literally no point in them being there. You never meet a live one, nor do they have any special effect on the stakes, so I don't know. Returning from collecting footage and doing a bit of research for this video, I'd like to inform you that the main villain of this game is actually a vampire. I thought he was just a scrawny, hairless werewolf, but then I googled him and found him to be a vampire, so that was well communicated. But the main problem I think with the story is that the writers clearly had a starting point and an ending point, and a few key events that needed to happen in between, and then just sort of shunted things around and contrived certain situations and wiggled the characterization around until everything was contorted into a story. Not a good one, but a story nonetheless. So many times, characters, including the protagonist, experienced an absolute absence of common sense. So many times I just wave my hands in absolute confusion. Why the fuck did you do that, Galahad? Why didn't you just talk to them, Galahad? Why did you say that, Galahad? Why are you doing this, Galahad? The story starts in such a place where all the characters act very naturally, so at first I cared a lot about him and I wanted him to succeed. But by the end, the writers were told to turn him into some lone steampunk Batman with a checkered past and a chip on his shoulder, and they just forced the square peg into that round hole until the cheap wood snapped and gave way and he lost all relatability, and even respectability with some of the dumb shit he ended up doing. Nikola Tesla is in it too, which is honestly a bit bewildering. I'm glad that the man is getting his credit as a pivotal historical figure, and I'm sure he'd maybe be flattered to know he was getting the accolades he deserves now after centuries of dismissal, but the game's a bit weird about it. They basically turn him into this simpering little soft boy who absolutely wanks off about the main character, utterly fawns over him in a way that's just kind of weird. Just resurrect the memory of this historically put upon man to make him worship the ground of fictional Belend walks on. He even gets captured at the end and your character randomly decides to go and save him, even though if you think about it, he's not in that much immediate danger at all. It's weird. I just found it really weird. It was nice of them to resurrect him, but god, it's weird if you look too hard at it. Across the course of the main story, your protagonist discovers a conspiracy to ship vampires into the city so that they can feed on the working class. The class you're also firing bullets into whenever they ask not to be fed on anymore. And you decide to prevent this by setting fire to all the evidence and then taking it to your higher-ups. And then there's no evidence and people assume you're just some wolf boy bitch who's committed a bit of arson. You could reach out to your trusted teammates in this time and explain the situation. Having worked with you for what seems to be hundreds of years, you could use your excellent rapport to convince them of what you've seen and ask for their help finding evidence before you take this before the order. Instead, you don't tell them, you get caught with your pants down, they vote against you, and then when you later have an opportunity to explain, you still refuse. By the time you're actually ready to talk to them, it's too late. All the chemistry between you that the game spent building up is good for nothing as they immediately assume your guilt without a second of protest, hesitation, or a request for further details. The game makes this huge deal of your broken relationships, but honestly it's more frustrating than anything. You just sat here calling Galahad a knob for seemingly choosing the dumbest option every single time. I guess one of the writers got sent a post-it just saying, make him get persecuted in the final few days before their deadline, and they just panicked and reshuffled the whole thing to make Galahad a heaving moron. Considering how easy it was to destroy the root of the problem, as your character fixes the crux of the mess a few chapters later with very little effort, I don't see how getting them involved would have ruined anything. In fact, it might have helped to have a little light shone on the problem, like cracking open a window in a musty old room, a bit of fresh air and all. You end up in a room with your former teammate who, surprise surprise, turned out to be a werewolf, and he's all naked on the floor and honestly looking pretty nice and chiseled, like clearly takes care of himself, and he's obviously a man who works out a lot, like honestly, looking pretty dreamy. You've stabbed him a bunch, so he's lying there, maybe dying, maybe not. The implication is that he's been mortally wounded, but you're also told to kill him, so I'm guessing he's just incapacitated until his werewolf healing happens or something. Anyway, he's having a good old moan because of human cruelty and stuff, and how he's sick of humanity, he's been rejected all his life, people can't know what he truly is, and blah blah blah, show me your bar, Alistair. He's babbling on and on about how he's rejected and how sad it all is when his dad walks in, his adoptive human father, and admits he knew all along that his boy was a werewolf and that he loves him all the same. And he realizes that humanity can be kind and it can be nurturing and it can be indiscriminately loving. And, well, problem solved, right? Nah, his dad tells you to plug him. Are you sure? Are you sure about that? I mean, do we really need to literally murder him? Isn't this just confirming his suspicions of humanity? Surely we can work through this together, find some equality between man and wolf, and talk as equals with this ambiguity cleaned up. He's seen we're capable of kindness, he's kind of stoked about it, so maybe we can collaborate on that? Galahad gets told to kill him, and I decided to try and wait it out to see if there was an option whereby Galahad might not have to kill him. No, you have to kill him. And then you get stripped of your title and rank, and you get exiled and forced to live in solitude for the rest of your days. And the final shot is Gally standing there like a bell end with a raggedy old scarf and a face like a slapped ass. By the end, he's some woe-is-me edgelord who roams the streets, exiled, brooding, solemn. A man without a home, he needs not for friendship nor companions because he's just too badass. Except wait, he's a massive tit, and you can't help but marvel at how he single-handedly did that to himself. I don't know, I had fun with the game, I did like it, I was pretty drawn in by the story until the final few hastily written chapters, and despite the simplicity of the combat, I did enjoy that too. Sure, the stealth sections are cancer and the main character is a bitch brain, but there was something in this game that I actually loved. Maybe it was the potential of it being a better game, just lurking there under the surface, I don't know. I don't know if I'd recommend it either. Maybe if you temper your expectations, or acclimate to a disappointing amount of werewolves. Thanks for watching my review of The Order 1886. In summary, I'd say it started strong, worked well, and then fell apart like a soggy sponge cake. It's a short story in game, and I got the limited edition special deluxe collector's box for something like £4, which is an ouch. So maybe it's worth grabbing if you're undecided about it. Either way, it is an easy platinum to get. Except for those final collectibles in the final room of the penultimate level that is timed so that you physically can't grab them all in one go, but there is a chapter select so you can hop back in. If you enjoyed the review, please like, subscribe, comment, or even share. Who knows, maybe your old Uncle Brian who thinks gaming is for lazy wasters and that anyone who enjoys a video game is immediately unproductive and no longer entitled to his respect would really like my reviews. I don't know. Thanks to my patrons also who support me endlessly in my weird endeavors, and thanks to you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for the next one.
May his name be forever resplendent.
Is it true? Did the Lord Chancellor fight by Arthur's side?
That is the legend. Today,